Hello there. So great recording now. Welcome everyone to a new Montevideo Tech Meetup, but this time we're going to make something different. The panels are for the multi talks, but this time we stole the format, and because we think this topic it's super interesting to have different voices and opinions, and not just have a presentation from someone talking about AI. And now I'm just saying AI out loud because the idea today is to cover different angles of AI. So for today's panel, as you saw over there, we have Alex, Christian from Max also will has his point on all this. Casey from Paramount, this our old friend from the house, and Nicolas Caballero, technical manager also at Qualabs, to join us the discussion. Please, if you want to join the conversation, you have any topics, any question, whatever, just raise your hand and try to moderate. Also, we have a lot of questions. We were talking before with the panelists for today, and just for a quick, we need to start doing something. It's like that with the panel. So a question for you is like, what was one of the latest things you did this week with AI? Just as icebreaker, Chris, maybe we can start with you and move on with the other from the panel.
Yeah, I mean, most of my time is in one way or another dealing with or engaging with them on our AI/robots team at Mux, but also use it heavily with the work I'm doing on Player Video.js for the stream processing framework, and worked about 15 hours yesterday and started work before this meeting, even though it's very early on Pacific time. Collaborating with Claude to develop documents primarily for Claude that will be referenced by skills that will be used for Claude to generate code with Claude for the stream processing framework. There's a PR up already for one of those, Casey, last night, and there's one that's stacking on top of that. So that has a lot to do with a variety of ways I am thinking about AI and how it relates to development in today and in the future.
Oh, I love them there for Claude. And you mentioned Casey. Maybe we can continue with related to you.
Sure. I mean, I'm using Claude in the background now to do all sorts of open source work. But the one that got me most excited this week was we're building a new sort of player architecture, trying to experiment with a new player architecture. And we need to verify that it works across all the devices that we support. And so we've been getting, bugs and reports coming in on certain platforms, some issues happening. And I go to test it in my standalone tenant work. It only happens in the player in the app. And usually debugging that is kind of a process. You have to deliver a build to the app team. The app team has to deploy it somewhere. We have to get it on a physical box in some room. And Claude is now where I can basically describe what's going on the screen, send it some screenshots, take some, like literally with my phone, on my TV that I have access to, and have it fairly thoroughly debug stuff. Which is a slow part, at least in player work, is that you gotta debug on some remote device, and you've only got, if you're lucky, you've got access to dev tools or Chrome dev tools, but you don't even always have that, especially things that are like boxes that are only allowed in certain regions and stuff. So that was a new one for me. I haven't had a whole lot of luck debugging video players with Claude until recently, and now it seems to have a very good knowledge of that. Now I'm thinking of entire little micro frameworks we can make for debugging these things and cutting down the iteration cycle on that. So that's my latest.
Amazing. A lot of things happening there. And so Nico Caballero, you can tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, it's not too related to video, but this week I work with our operations manager on a small automation. She do one thing. For the context, every Monday we have a staffing meeting where we make a lot of decisions. We have a lot of discussion there, and she always generates the notes from her personal notes, and the Google Meet script. So we automated together using the Cloud routines. Basically, we generate one routine that runs every Monday at the same time, which pulls the Google Meets and transcribe from the drive, runs it through a custom template and drops the drafts Slack DM. So she stays in the loop and validates before sending to the rest of the team.
That's amazing. That means also like we have to think not just about how to develop or testing, it's also how we operate. So this is a very, very good insight from you. And Alex, what about you?
Yeah, so this week, 3 things. I was working on a couple of tenders working with Claude. That is also very helpful. The other thing is that I'm working on getting all the integrations. We are ISO 27001 certified, and we are a company that works for companies that are NIS2 relevant. So the whole IT security part is extremely important, and then with Mythos and everything else, it gets more complicated. So currently, the main effort is you use all these different tools. You use Slack, you use ClickUp, you use all these different tools. And the benefit of using Claude is to connect all of them. But if you connect them, you have to take care of who can access what, who can change what. And that is getting really complicated. And if you then want to roll this out to a team that works on different projects for different customers, there is a multitude of things that can go wrong. And so working on an AI policy that captures this feels a bit difficult, because as soon as you have, something else has changed already. So it's more like a stream of consciousness that you have, and that changes. And capturing this in an ISO compatible way is an art. I don't know how we succeed with that, but that's currently where we are working on. That's the not fun part. The fun part is that I've been using AI a lot for opening up standards to work with that and create some parsers. This one based on not a request, but a suggestion by Adrian, was to get the C2PA specification into it. So that's what I've been working this week. So get all the C2PA specifications, and that's more fun than working on AI policies.
It's a thing also. Maybe you can say I agree it's not the fancy part, but it's a very, very, very important part of all this. At the end, I think also for, as you said, like for all this new technology or new tools, it's a lot of things to learn how those applies to these new technologies. I want to bring into the table about the standards. I remember we talked together at My High Video, and I remember that time you said, hey, I'm spending a lot of time learning with AI. Particularly, you mentioned that you were building things with AI for spec validation with Prolog, if I remember well. Can you explain us a little bit about what was your prototyping and things you learned there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was back in, I think it was in November, DMAX in London, where I saw a presentation, and I forgot the name of who that was, who was talking about how he used the HLS specification and Prolog and open it up to query over the specification. And the nice thing, if you listen to a presentation, you can immediately start coding with your laptop on your lap. So I did that, and then did a couple of iterations and tests and trials. And so over time, since November, a kind of a framework that enables me now to take any specification, then read it, and then move each statement into a logical Prolog statement. But then Claude is not possible, because some of the statements are "T shall meet every 6 weeks." That's not something that I can enforce. So yeah, there were some things to change. But so what works in the specification, I have a dual LLM mechanism with Claude and GPT-5.5. They are reading both the same sentences and deriving rules from that. And it takes some 5 to 10 review rounds until they agree on how this is to be interpreted. And the output is Prolog statements that can be used for deterministic logical reasoning on Prolog. And I use these Prolog statements and generate test vectors for these specifications. I also gather test vectors from the open source tools that are available, so that I can see that it's not something that I made completely up, but also validated against available sources. A bitstream parser and validator with provenance for the rules that are violated if something is wrong. So what comes out is, if I take, I have something like 45 standards right now, from very low ones that do not depend on anything else, like ISO 8601, how are dates formatted or how are URLs formatted. So these are basic ones. and then up to MPEG-TS, H.264, AV1, up to TLS, and there are some gaps still, but it's coming together. And then you can take a byte stream, or you can take a short snippet and can have it validated. And if it's not validating, it tells you, hey, you are violating spec page 7, paragraph 5, because you're not covering that bit rate, or you're exceeding value XYZ. So it tells you exactly what's wrong. And at one point, I made a small Robin Hood bot that walked through public forums on the internet, and that one was about SCTE35, which I'm not an expert in. So I took my SCTE3 and it looked into, I think it was from Comcast, an open source library, where there was some cases that had been open for a very long time, because if that's per spec or not. And I was not per spec. I could point to the right point in the spec, and so people seem to be happy with that. So that was one single thing that helped me. I don't know yet what we are doing with that. So currently we are using it for our own terms. So in some cases, when Claude wanted to use FFmpeg, I told him to use my Rust library for MFF muxing. That worked very well. In some other cases, we exchanged external libraries with our own libraries, and it's the luxury of going really down to the source and being sure that with that review that we had, and with this validation on the public sources that are available, we can now really trust that. And we had several cases where we could very quickly say, okay, no, this is not by spec, this is by spec, and it solved problems more easily.
Very interesting. And this made me think about also what you mentioned, like, oh, I'll run it in another project and start doing things with this. So that points me also with thinking about all this tooling being created, and also like open source projects. Probably, I guess that the Comcast project you tried on was an open source one. That's the reason you could. And also it's like how now AI could be used for leverage open source projects like a library that Casey is driving, or for example, now 10. So I don't know, maybe Christian, maybe you can tell us more about how you are working with Vue.js 10, that it's an open source player being built from scratch. And I understand that you are using also this spec-driven development, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about this because I think it's an interesting topic that can be overstated and understated. I'll put it that way. So I am very much still a human in the loop with all of my processes at all stages here. What I am actually exploring with the PR I talked about this morning and some stacking PRs is not understanding that someone steering LLMs who has deep and broad expertise in the domain is not only going to be able to effectively shape how the implementation works, but also how to iteratively build the skills that will be used in relation to those specs. So I've been using, not just for this effort, but in other efforts, I kind of do a lather, rinse, repeat, where I will iterate on either docs, formalization of docs, or skills, and then completely clear context, or as much as I can clear context, memory, etc. And then try to use the skill to do the thing that I am developing, see how good of a job it in certain ways, give it feedback, reproduce it, and then get rid of the thing that it produced and do a dry run. So that's one part of using the docs and the skill development there. But another one that I'm exploring is it's easy to interpret spec-driven development as your choices are either you're trying to like one-shot or ad hoc your way, maybe if you're not like assuming a one-shot will work, into writing code with LLMs, or you're trying to build an exhaustive specification and then one-shot, or and so the way I tend to think about this, which is the way I think about this stuff in general, is treating both the specifications and the development as living and iterative into what I was talking about before. So if you look at the PR I just drafted and you look at the docs, you'll note that there's different like categories of like how defined they are. And this is all intended to just generate the docs, which will then feed into doing the actual development, which will develop a plan. But what I'm working on right now with the skill on the plan is saying use these docs as a starting point, not as a specification, for then iterating on writing the code, again with a human in the loop to be able to evaluate, potentially iterate on some skills again, and then at the tail end update the docs themselves, to formalize them, to bring them to a different stage. So it's not exactly an either or. And I want to like drive home specifically the point of like it's easy to see spec-driven development as create a spec that defines the implementation and then tell the robot to go build the implementation to spec. And it can be a like more nuanced than that.
Super interesting. What do you think, Casey? What's your experience here and building all the common media library now in the AI agents era?
Yeah, I'm also a fan of the spec-driven development. I do a much lighter version of it, just because stuff in the common media needs to be a little bit more self-contained. So it's a lot easier to just be like, do a spec, give me an implementation plan, and get that thing settled. And then for the most part, it one-shots them, which is good. And I mean, like that's the way. At least I was always taught that we should be developing code, and we never got to do it. It was always just like, oh, I got to get this done. You just start typing, and so now the planning step is quite nice. And the other big one on Common Media Library is getting the tests written up front before any code's written as well. So it's a combination of like spec and test driven development. Because if we want it to be taken seriously, it has to be thorough and for the most part. And so getting those things clear, and like in the CMCD version 2 spec, the work on driven in that way of like, here's the CMCD spec to implement the features. And as an open source maintainer, the other part that I really love about AI in general is that I'm using it a little bit more towards the sort of thing. You guys, Qualabs, you guys put in set of work into Common Media Library, which was great. I don't know C2PA. C2PA is also very, crypto heavy, and there's a lot of stuff that you don't want to mess up there. And so it was really nice to have an assistant summarize stuff and go research, all the there's 8 different specs, in one function. It's Stibor and Josie and the various encryption algorithms and everything else. So I needed to learn, and that would have taken a very long time previously. Like that PR would have been held up for quite a bit while I sat there and verified, because I'm not yet comfortable just clicking OK and letting the bots do what they do. So that aspect of I found that it makes it better for like the documentation and all the stuff that you don't always have time for. Like I'm a maintainer of this library, but I've got a day job, so I have a finite amount of time that I can do stuff, and I'm finding that the stuff that I'm able to do is much better than it ever was before. It also helps me do a lot of the paperwork of like moving it, making sure, like just all the stuff that it's like, oh, I got to do this now. I can at least automate some of that, pseudo automate some of that away. So for me, it's been a massive help as a developer writing code, but like an assistant. Like I'm thinking about OpenClaw or Hermes as running in the background, helping me with all my open source stuff. Like I'm getting to that point.
That's amazing. So, because one fear we had, and maybe again for Chris to cover, like you are maintainers now for open source libraries like this. So one fear I heard a long time ago was like, oh, I'm going to have a lot of PRs that are not well defined, not well tested. It's like, oh, I'm going to have a lot of things to work because now AI can write code as crazy. Do you feel that's happening or not? Or now that you say this, Casey, for that scenario with all these assistance from the AI?
I don't know. Like I said, I already don't have enough time. So luckily right now, Common Media Library has not been that way, but I am hearing it from some of the other open source maintainers that it's starting to come in. And so I don't necessarily have a good answer for that, because it is also helpful, like the CMCD work, for example. Like we got CMCD v2 into CML, but then I had to go put it into Shaka, and Dash.js, years and tiers of work that I just wouldn't have been able to get done as quickly without it. So like it's needed, I think, to help drive some of this open source stuff. But I don't know how. I don't have a good answer for how you do. That comes in. I just don't.
Yeah, we also we have a bunch of open source projects over at Mux related to like last mile player playback web stuff. The majority of those are either like niche or Mux specific, which is a different kind of niche. And then we have Video.js v10. For all the other ones, we haven't experienced the floodgates yet, so also don't have an answer for you. And we haven't opened up PR's list for our repo. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see if it becomes. I'm probably the one most prone to writing mega PRs, as Casey has seen, with a bunch of code changes or docs changes or what have you, heavily generated by Claude.
And you mentioned that contribute CGPA that initially to understand. So Nico, how was the process that you followed and you used on all these, and how was your experience to create specs, to create a implementation of spec to contribute to the open source community?
Okay, well, it's very similar that the Christian and Casey described. I basically things on what we want to start generating the plan and iterate it until that reach a stage that accomplish what I want to build and then execute it. And it's interesting because I would like to go in a more personal opinion about how this was my work with AI so far. And so this is going to be a bit philosophical.
Go for it. We're open.
I don't have evidence beyond my own experience and some on the office, but when I was working on the C2PA live stream implementation, not just the CML, I in other repositories, I noticed that the work didn't get easier with the AI. It got definitely hard in some way because I wasn't write code anymore. However, I was making like 200 micro decisions about accept, reject, refine, all day reviewing what Claude wrote, the spec, the plan, or the implementation. And in my experience with that, the work feels it has shifted from cognitive, mechanical, to full cognitive. Because before AI, engineers had a clear separation: model the problem, sketch the architecture, and then implement it. But with AI, that boundary blur. I think that the design now happens implicitly while you are reviewing what Claude generates. And also, I think that is a kind of fatigue I'm starting to notice in myself, in conversation with others, engineers, that didn't exist before. It's a bit different. And also, I think that it's too early to know how this new way of working will impact on people or teams. Generation doing this, which is awesome, with a lot of new challenges.
Nico, am I allowed to ask Nico a question?
Yeah.
Well,
I can dig Mate.
Yeah. I'm curious about how you experience this as similar or dissimilar or a little bit of both from managing teams of, say, junior developers where you're not the one writing the code, but you do have to do a lot of reviewing. You might have to give a lot of pushback, but also LLMs are not junior devs in a lot of very relevant ways. So yeah, about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that the most different is you can request a change for a human, and it's could take some time. The AI is make the change instantly, and you are reviewing one after one, and you continue reviewing. I think that's the main difference.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's there's some psychological or cognitive.
I'm not psychology person, but studies about it. But
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like even though it's in some ways because it's like better at or faster at doing the work, that means usually like, okay, next. I feel that 100%.
That's a very good question also to cover with Alex. Alex, you have been a lot of time also using this. So how do you feel about this cognitive consumption on for example, you run a company, and so also you have spent a lot of time with this. What are your opinions on this?
I really went deep down the last 9 months, 10 months, and at times, so mainly how much can I do in parallel? And in my job role, I'm used to jump from one topic to another, because usually people come to me if something is not working, switch from one problem to another one. So that's pretty similar to working with all these agents in parallel. And when I was young, one mentor told me that his managing style was managing by walking around. And I feel now walking around, partly to the team, partly to the agents, and take hands and look at what they are doing, and getting pushback and giving them pushback and discussing it. So I think the maximum I was working in front of me I have 4 4K screens. I have bad 40, 50-year-old eyes. So I'm happy to have them in 3 meters from me. At the top time, I had 20 terminal windows open, each with 3 to 4 agents in parallel. That was too much. That was not working. So currently I'm down to, I don't know, it's like 10 sessions maximum. And still the main problem that I see for me is if I'm working with it, it is completely adopting my personal style. And even if I inject a lot of information where I say, please don't please me, please give me pushback, please challenge my questions, and that turn to, we stop here, please go out and take some glass of wine, we continue tomorrow. So it gives me real pushback, but even still, it's my personal style. And the challenge I see now is to roll this out to a team of 20, 30 developers and make sure that all are aligned. And that means that I have not to discuss it with a very rational, paid-for age teams with opinions, and then things get more complicated. So there is a huge temptation to find it very pleasing to work with AI, and at the same time knowing that I need and to get that bridge, to bridge that gap. That's something I find very difficult right now and very work intensive.
Who's Nico? Right as hand started coming up. His hand first.
I wanted to kind of echo that, and I think the job of being a developer has changed on recognition in the last 6 months. Since LLM started to become really, really useful, and I think it's causing, there are some friction points as a result of that. People have spent the last 20 plus years of their career as code.
We lost your audio.
You mute
Everyone.
No luck.
This agent again.
We're just working on an AI sign language avatar, so that might also help if your audio goes away.
I have to move on since you dropped.
Yeah, we have Sergeant
AI, but we still care.
Yeah, I don't know, Joe, Scott, who's so you guys can battle.
Yeah, I think I was next. If we don't want to go this direction, just let me know that I'm going in a bad direction. But I know many of the panelists personally, so I'm kind of curious. I have a question about ethics. So I've been around for a while. And I'm excited by benefits. I'm kind of blown away by the capabilities and just kind of learning. I've been around since data privacy was a potential societal change, social media, and I've seen 25 years of community, environmental. I don't think we're in a better place years ago with the rise of tech. So are other people having heartburn about this? And the one answer I don't want to hear is everybody else is doing it, so we have to do it. I learned a long time ago that's not an ethical answer. What all of our 5 years old. But I'm curious what people are feeling and they're thinking. I know there's a philosophy major.
Yeah.
What we call I'll gladly talk about that. I hope we don't take up the next. Yeah, I mean, Scott, you know me, unsurprising, possibly, it's complicated, and there's different dimensions here. How do I feel about current LLM companies and how they function? It's not great. Independent of any singularity paperclip concerns, the companies themselves are gobbling up energy, influencing politics, et cetera, and I do think navigating the reality of that world is also complicated. It's very hard. Anyone who's watched The Good Place knows it's very hard to have a purity politics or purity value system where it's like, I am not touching the thing that I see bad, but then you do like 2 degrees of, so actually I am in pretty much every part of my life. And so like that reality we actually live in is going to be part of that. There's complications in terms of the behaviors of companies. We're seeing a bunch of layoffs, people trying to turn the few human developers into as close as machines as possible, so that they can most effectively work with LLMs. My broken brain is particularly good at that, but most people should be like me. So I'm concerned about those things, but that's going to be a case-by-case basis. Like so far, Mux doesn't seem to be the sort of company that is behaving in that way. So I think that that's going to be the values of the particular company. And then you have sort of like the long-term practical meets ethical issues where in particular these companies are trying to not hire juniors, which means we're only going to have in about 5 to 10 years, which means we're going to be in a very, if people are not thinking about that future, which is going to proceed very quickly. There's lots of other ethics we can get into here, but that's a start.
That particular, I want to add there, that's a very particular, what you mentioned is like, no juniors, no seniors. That's like basic. Also, I think companies has to somehow also adapt. If I think the people who is studying right now, engineering, computer engineering, something like that, they're going to be in the market in 5-6 years working with us, and probably the way that they learn and they use and they create software will be very different. So we have to adapt to the new generation's skills.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, this some of what I was touching on, I was calling out before. Like, I have definitely experienced the way I work, which most of my days, most of my time is spent talking to robots. That has been true for about 6 months now, maybe a little more than 6 months. Literally, the person I talk most with is Claude. Pretty 5 out of 7 days a week. And like there is an aspect where that can be dehumanizing and like take a psychological toll. So that's also something. And Alex, you were like you try like how many at once and you're like, this is unmaintainable. So making sure that like at the top level down to the bottom level, empathy for the fact that we are humans and we are not trying to dehumanize the humans so that we can eke out as much performance out of those possible is going to be important.
At one point, I was starting to model my own time for reviewing as a parameter to Claude and say, okay, whatever you build, I have to review it. So keep that in mind, and whatever steps you take prepare for my scarce time and my cognitive load to keep it as low as possible, and try to come up with as much proof and evidence that I need to trust the result in a deterministic way, and follow it up through because it got too complicated and there were too many more interesting things to focus on. But I think it's absolutely necessary to model your cognitive load and through the system.
But you also nudged it to berate you and tell you to take a break or take a walk. So there's like those things too.
Yeah.
Sarge, I think you have a question. You have the hands up. Are you there, Sarge? You're mute, just in case. Oh.
All right, I'm here.
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
So my question is really for the managers in the room of these junior engineers. So if Claude, Chad for ChatGPT, and Jimmy for Gemini. So if all these agents can do so much work in so much time and save cycles, how do you address this with your junior engineers? What does your hiring look like now, given the fact that you can use robots and agents to do most of the work that a junior engineer would do, right? You're all human in the room, or human to go through things. And yeah, you guys spend way too much time. And definitely good tip to put in a break logic into your workflow. But how do you guys as managers, because when I'm talking about AI, especially like I have 2 younger kids who they're not coders, they're creatives, but that is their biggest being coming too dependent on the AI, 2, not being able to find a job and therefore get out of my house because they can't afford a living, because of it. People are coming up with these computer science degrees, junior developers? How do you guys as managers address these things?
Maybe I can take that question.
For it.
Well, two different things. First of all, in my opinion, the human in the loop will be necessary because the accountability of the code that the AI generates still will be with us. Because the model isn't on the PR, we are. If the delivery code is wrong, our name is at the top of that commit. So yeah, at the end, we are accountable for anything we generate using AI or not. And for example, here in Qualabs, we are making it real with smaller commits and entire loops. And in my opinion, the review bar is higher for AI code than for human code, just because the AI code looks correct by default. And regarding the other part, or more the preparation of the juniors in some way, here in Qualabs, we are working on generates. We wanted the AI adoption across every engineering team, not just concentrated in few people. Of course, we could have hired some AI specialists, but we think that create a dependency or like a center of experience expertise model where everyone else depends on the expert, like the seniors. And we want an organic adoption. We want engineers learning AI from engineers sitting next to them. And with that in mind, we launch an internal lab, AI lab, as the center of gravity, and ambassador programs. We define one ambassador per team, and the idea behind that ambassador program is having a person on the team that surface the use cases, share patterns, bring guardrails, and block teammates, and translate the cutting edge like skills, context windows, agent loops into something that the team can use in their current or next sprint. So the idea is to having these ambassadors, the juniors, can learn about how to use the AI. In some way, they will be semi-seniors or seniors because, as I said, we still need the human in the loop.
Great. Adrian.
Can you folks hear me this time? Hooray!
So far we can.
Just other people, there's a number of huge cultural shifts now, because actually the role of developer, I have a whole bunch of people working along our developers precisely because they're proud of the kind of artisan skills they bring to that process. And the job of developing in an AI context is very, very different. It becomes much more like the job of a manager. And I think some of the pressures that puts on people under, we need to understand and take into account, because suddenly talk to us and they'll go, oh yeah, I've got sessions open. And actually what I'm going to spend all my afternoon doing is making sure I've got things in my Ralph Wiggum loop so that when I wake up in the morning, the elves are, and I think we're putting a lot of stress on people and without their consent, changing the nature of the role these people have, where they are, they were there as developers, they were there as craftsmen, and suddenly they are people managing very fast idiots, where you suddenly have to contact. And again, I think one of the motivations for a lot of these people as perhaps they aren't that good at lifting, that they can think very, very, very deeply about a specific problem. Amazing. And suddenly the way you have to interact with these systems becomes very different. You have to go, right, that's going to take you that, another system so that I'm burning it because, et cetera, et cetera. I also, I love it when I hear people say, human in the loop. I don't know what that's in years' time. I genuinely don't. And I think we have to address the possibility that it might not look like where we want it to. And so, does Norse use AI? Extremely heavily. We build and all of our developers use these tools as their primary axe nowadays. Exactly what that's going to look like in 5 years' time, I think, is a little bit scary. Just in case any of you are not, is Tailwind story, because I think this is, for me, sums up how the world is eating itself right now. So for those of you who don't know the Tailwind story, I just had a quick look. So we've probably has 100 and something million downloads a week. It's quite popular. Over the last year, their usage, good on you, Christian, because otherwise the world is absolutely going to eat themselves. That was Christian saying. Their usage over the last, I can't remember that, because other AIs are really good at Tailwind CSS. Their revenue, because on all of those, are really, really good at, so they know the drive to have people use their professional product where they would have stuff cease to exist. And the market is acting locally and killing itself, because like that, being able to deliver amazing state. If there's no commercial incentive to write that, where's the Tailwind CSS for 100 million downloads by Claude, in 5 years' time going to come from? I have simply no idea. So.
Yep, that's great. So yeah, I think for sure, in my opinion, we are in front of an industrial revolution for sure, and I think it's the fourth probably, right? So yeah, it'll change, and we will have to adapt. I'm optimistic on all this, so I can see all the good parts of this, and I'm really excited because I love technology and I love how we can create new things, and maybe. For sure, in an industrial revolution will be companies or things that will move or will change, because at the moment, maybe a company that, I don't know, before the train, we had horses and maybe someone has the biggest horses company, and then it's trains. So it changes. So I think history has shown us that, things like that can happen, but it's part of something we already, this is my opinion, right? Things we already saw. Now that we have 5 minutes left, I would like to, maybe from the panelists, have a few words, like some conclusions or some but we can discuss that. And some words, and so I don't know, so something you would like to share with the audience, maybe starting with Casey.
Thanks. I don't know. I don't really have much. I'm probably the most pragmatic person here, as far as I'm using it as a code agent. I'm using it for very concrete things. And so I don't have a lot of it looking for I've looked into like OpenClaw, or something like that, where I'm trying to get more into it in my personal life, but I'm like, I don't want it in my personal life. When I'm not in front of the computer, I want to be doing not computer things, and I don't need, my schedule's not that busy that I need like that. So I don't know. It is definitely the world that we're in. I traditionally, as an engineer, you always, it was like, you keep doing engineering or you move into management. Well, we're all moving into management, and I don't know if I'm any good at that at the moment. So I'm learning here on the fly, and it's scary, but it's fun. It's new tech. So at the end of the day, I likes to play with new tech. So that's
Great.
it.
Thank you, Nico.
I think my recommendation would be build a small POC, pick a tool you are curious about, write what you want to build, to learn from it, and of course, don't.
Casey? Christian, sorry.
Oh, good. So lots I could talk about. It touches from research, personal, not work related. But on the coding side, since that's mostly where I live, I would suggest thinking about not just how you can use AI to write code, but also how and LLMs will probably be consuming your code, especially if you work on things like libraries, how they are going to be user personas in documents, and how and when to use to generate reproducible code, aka build tools, compiler, that kind of stuff, versus using it to write the code. There are different trade-offs there. Trying to think about when you want something to be reliably reproducible, and you can try to make an LLM get better and better at that reproducibility, or you can try to get the LLM to make the code that is reliably reproducible. So just lots of is in this world of that you should be thinking about, because things are, whether we like it or not, whether it's utopian or dystopian, it probably will be pretty different within 3 to 5 years at the latest, I would say, more than that.
And to close, Alex?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. So I think first of all, we need an analyst from doing weird things in front of a webcam. That's an important part. Otherwise, I think I could foresee the future in such a short time frame. So I can't predict anything anymore. So that feels weird. But the thing I think that I came back to all the time is we now have access to all the same tools. We can all use Claude, we can all use Levy, we can all use the open source models. Perhaps one has more token usage because they have more money to buy tokens, but otherwise we have access to the same tools. But if I get a piece of wood and a knife in front of me, what I can produce with it is very ugly. I'm not an artist, but if you give it to somebody who's a crafty, artsy person, they can make beautiful things with it. And I think that the same is true in a way with the AI tools. It's like an amplifier. If you the better you are, the more you know about a topic, the better the outcome is that you can create with AI. So it's like any musical instrument, start practicing it and start to get better, and then amplify it. And if for me in my role as a managing director, try to get all the people aboard and enable them to use their creativity and their knowledge and amplify it with AI. That's what I'm trying to do.
Music for my ears. I love that. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope you enjoyed this special edition, this panel, and see you in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.